over 20% of the forces have been killed. And that's the low end of the estimates. Killed. Forget about captured and wounded. The war is going catastrophically for Ukraine. The Russians are relentlessly winning. And they are going to take over huge swaths of territory of this country. Because I'm in Ukraine right now. I'm in the city of Kharkov. I hear, rather, the shelling every day. And the shelling gets closer every day. The mainstream media is lying to you. The Russians are winning definitively. And because they are winning so definitively, and they have no intention of stopping, I mean, why would they? They're winning. Well, the Biden administration finds itself that they have put all of their chips on Ukraine, and Ukraine is definitively losing. It's quite frankly a miracle that the Ukrainian armed forces is still standing after the annihilation it has received. It is inconceivably horrible what has happened to these young men. And every single one of them is a brave man with a family, and they've died pretty much for nothing except the desires of the Biden administration. And now the Biden administration finds itself with a catastrophic loss, and so they are going to escalate. And the way it seems that they are going to escalate is by creating a situation, an incident in Lithuania. Lithuania, one of the Baltic republics, one of the members of NATO, well, the Baltic Republic of Lithuania has cut off access of Russian railway to Kaliningrad. Now, for those of you who don't know, basically, here's Russia, here is Lithuania, and over here is a little piece called Kaliningrad that's on the Baltic Sea. That this was captured in the Second World War, but it's detached from the mainland of Russia. Lithuania is between them. And Lithuania has had an agreement, a long-standing agreement of over 30 years, that they would never impede any train between Russia and Kaliningrad. That they would basically consider that train like a corridor that could go back and forth between Kaliningrad and Russia. And now they've cut it. And now they are making moves in terms of moving troops. Now, Lithuania has a microscopic army, but the Polish army is also on the move. The Polish army has been making moves on the Belarusian border. All of this leads me to conclude realistically that at this time, there is the intention by NATO to provoke the Russians into defending Kaliningrad. Now, Kaliningrad, it's one of those areas that's armed to the teeth, okay? The Russians have all kinds of weapons there. The actual territory of Kaliningrad, right? They're not really worried about it. That's not the issue. The issue is Russian territory is going to be attacked by the Lithuanians and the Poles. And what are the Russians supposed to do? Just, sit there and take it? Of course not. They're going to hit back, and they're going to hit hard. They're going to hit harder, much harder than they've hit Ukraine. Why? Because the Russians consider the Ukrainians a brother people. Lithuanians, they're just foreigners. They don't care about the Lithuanians. And the Poles, same thing. I mean, the Russians and the Poles have hated each other for going on 400 years, okay? And so now it seems clear that Lithuania and Poland are setting up the conditions to provoke Russia into attacking one or the other or both. And this will draw in all the other NATO states, including the United States. Now, it doesn't take a genius to realize that the brains behind this idiotic idea are American brains, the Biden administration. There are crazies in the State Department and in the US Senate and in the Biden administration itself. They all want war with Russia. And they're sick and tired of pussyfooting around using the proxy of Ukraine to fight against the Russians. And so they want to have American troops fighting directly against Russians. This will be a catastrophe, and I will explain to you why. Because you see, the Ukrainian armed forces were NATO trained. NATO trained approximately 10 to 12,000 Ukrainian troops every year for the past 8 years. That is approximately 80 to 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers were trained to NATO standards in terms of tactics, maneuvers, communication, control, everything. The Ukrainian armed force was the largest, best equipped, and best trained NATO army that has ever been fielded. Man for man, it was better than the American armed forces, and that's the truth. They're certainly better motivated because, after all, the Ukrainian soldiers, well, they're defending their own land from the Russian invaders. So they're better trained, better equipped, and more motivated. And they have been annihilated. What do you think will happen to Lithuanian troops, Polish troops, or American troops that go up against the Russians? They're going to be annihilated too, especially because the Russian troops at this time, what they have been doing is that they have been rotating all of their troops constantly. They've only put in, at any one given time, about 190,000 troops. At this time, it's estimated that they only have 130,000 troops, but their entire army of over 1 million men has been rotated through Ukraine. They all have combat experience, hardcore combat experience. They're going to annihilate the Americans. And this is where the danger comes in. I don't care how much you love the American flag. I don't care how much you say that America #1 and best equipped army and all that bullshit. The fact is they're going to be annihilated by the Russians like that. And after, the Biden administration, out of panic and out of a cavalier attitude that it's no big deal, they are going to use nuclear weapons. They are going to do that. The United States has never taken off the first strike option from its menu of options insofar as a military conflict is concerned. The Russians have. The Russians have stated definitively that they will never use nuclear weapons on a first strike basis. Never. Only in response to a nuclear attack. But the Americans have never made that promise.